Hello there, and thank you for stopping by Snail's Story today. Today, I want to tell you a story about a 17-year-old girl, the daughter of a janitor, who quietly walked into a boardroom on the 27th floor, pointed to a contract about to be signed, and said, "If you sign this, your company will collapse." They laughed at her, but weeks later, no one was laughing anymore, because the girl was right. And she didn't just save a corporation, she exposed an entire web of corruption hiding beneath expensive suits. This story isn't about rebellion. It's about quiet courage, sharp clarity, and one simple question: will anyone listen if the one who sees the truth is just the janitor's daughter? Let's come with me to the very heart of this story. And if you believe this is a truth worth spreading, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. Now, let's begin. The 28th floor of the Grant Sterling Capitol building was silent as a grave. Every chair in the boardroom was upholstered in genuine leather, and the lights shimmered off the polished glass table, as if the room were reserved only for decisions that could never be wrong. Then, a voice rang out from near the glass doorknob. Loud but sharp like a blade. That clause will reverse the entire liability. If you sign it, your company will be the one to bear all the losses. Every eye turned toward the doorway. A young woman stood there, hair tied in a neat bun, an old coat on her shoulders, and a pair of borrowed sneakers on her feet. The tag on her chest read Visitor Maintenance Department, and almost no one could comprehend how she had managed to be there. Mitchell Grant, Chairman and CEO, froze mid-signature on the final line of a $1.8 billion merger contract. His silver eyebrows furrowed slightly. Beside him, Veronica Grant, his wife and a board member, narrowed her eyes. "Who is this girl?" A quiet chuckle echoed. It came from Marcus Blackwood, CEO of Croswell Partners, the merger partner dressed in a flawless Italian suit, smiling like he had just heard an amusing joke. "Apologies," Marcus said, voice so polite it slid off like oil. "Are we taking legal advice from whom, exactly?" Callie Moore didn't flinch. She stepped further into the room and pointed at the file in front of Mitchell. "I read that clause on page 14, section C, line 3. It shifts all post-merger legal liabilities onto Grant Sterling Capital." No one spoke. The only sound was the rustling of a young executive scrolling urgently through page 14 on his iPad. Others flipped through printed files. The air thickened, as if every oxygen molecule was weighing the matter. A whisper floated through the room. "Isn't she the janitor's daughter?" Not even an employee. Veronica leaned forward, her grip tightening on the leather chair. "You're not authorized to be here," she said coldly. Callie didn't move. She had mopped the floor of that very boardroom every Monday night, where expensive shoes marched across without ever noticing her. But this time, she hadn't come to clean. Just 8 hours earlier, she was still holding a broom. Her mother, Teresa Moore, was vacuuming the hallway, while Callie was assigned to clean the photocopy room. That's where she had spotted the file left on the machine, labeled Final Draft Merger Contract. It wasn't curiosity, it was instinct. Callie wasn't like other teenagers. While others scrolled through social media, she read corporate law books, once writing a school essay titled How Enron Collapsed. And when her eyes landed on that tiny paragraph under section C, saw it. A trap. "Mom," she had whispered that night, "have you ever seen a contract that dumps all liability on one side like this?" "Callie," her mother replied, not even lifting her head from the glass wall she was scrubbing. "Don't touch what isn't yours. You want us to lose our jobs?" Callie stayed quiet. But her mind kept racing now, standing before the sharpest business minds in the city. Not one of them had caught it. Mitchell slowly flipped back to the file, his eyes scanning the exact line Callie pointed to. He stopped. His face remained, but his fingers clenched the paper. "You're saying," he said slowly, This clause hides the true liability. Yes, sir, Callie replied firmly. The legal phrasing is deliberately misleading. If there are lawsuits, bad debts, or fraudit'll be Grant Sterling held accountable. Crosswell walks away clean. Veronica let out a dismissive chuckle, stripped of grace. Mitchell, this is absurd. She's just a child, a floor cleaner. Mitchell didn't look at his wife. He only looked at the paper. For so long that everyone in the room felt breathless. Marcus Blackwood leaned forward, his smile starting to fade. We can't let a high schooler's analysis derail a finalized draft, Mitchell. Callie flushed, but she stood her ground. Laugh if you want. But if you sign that, your company will face all the lawsuits alone. Silence, then Mitchell nodded subtly toward security. Escort the young lady out. 2 guards approached. Callie didn't resist, but just as the glass door was about to close behind her, she turned her head back, and in that split second, Mitchell Grant no longer saw a cleaning girl. He saw a warning, a mirror, and a mistake that nearly became fate. His pen had never touched the paper again. Asterisk. Callie sat in the security room on the ground floor of Grant's Sterling Capital, her hands tightly clasped, chin resting on her knees. She had been sitting there for nearly an hour. No one spoke. No one looked at her. The building had returned to its outward calm, but inside Callie, each passing second ticked like a countdown. Beside her, Teresa Moore, Callie's mother, sat upright, gripping her worn purse. Her face showed no expression, but her eyes were red. Every word her mother had said the night before echoed in Callie's mind. Do you want us to lose our jobs? And now, that possibility was closer than ever. No one had officially fired them. Oh, but they weren't allowed on the night shift that evening. They had simply been asked to take a temporary leave pending review. Mom, I'm sorry, Callie whispered. Teresa turned her head slowly, her eyes holding back not anger but exhaustion. You should be, she replied, voice thin as a thread. I've bent my back cleaning floors for 14 years to raise you, not so you could walk into a boardroom and point fingers at the CEO. Callie lowered her head. She couldn't argue. Not because her mother was wrong, but because she understood. Her mother was afraid. Someone who had spent their life staying unnoticed would always fear their child being seen, especially in a building that was never built for people like them. But inside Callie, something still wouldn't settle. I wasn't trying to shame you, but I saw something dangerous, and I couldn't let them sign it without knowing. Before Teresa could reply, the door opened. A woman in a crisp business suit stepped in, holding a clipboard, eyes cold as steel. Double quotes, Mrs. Moore, she said, not even glancing at Callie, only at Teresa. HR has decided to place both of you on immediate suspension. We will be in touch. No explanation. No one asked what Callie had said. No one cared whether she was right or wrong. Teresa stood up, gently squeezing her daughter's hand, as if to hold her back from reacting. Let's go. Outside, the Stonehaven wind sliced between glass towers like it could cut skin. Callie glanced back at the building she had walked past every night for the past 3 years, where her mother wielded a mop like a weapon to protect their family. Now, it was no longer a place of routine, no longer a shelter. They walked home to the 3rd-floor apartment in the old building on Derby Street. While her mother entered the kitchen to boil water, Callie sat on the couch, hands wrapped around a cup of cocoa she didn't drink. Everything was spiraling out of control. Mom, do you really think I was wrong? Teresa set the kettle on the stove but didn't turn around. I think you've lost faith in adults. For the first time, Callie didn't reply, because part of her knew her mother was right. If the directors had done their jobs properly, if the legal team had read every line, why would it take a janitor's daughter to point out a trap hidden in a merger contract? A ping from the laptop made Callie jump. An unfamiliar name appeared on the screen, from jared.whitlow@protonmail.com. Subject. You saw it too. Her heart thumped. She opened the email. Only one line. I used to work there. I know what you saw. If you want to talk, I'm ready to listen. Callie stared at the words. Then she began typing. At that same moment, on the top floor of Grant's sterling capital, Mitchell Grant sat alone in his office. In front of him lay the unsigned contract. The page with the clause Callie pointed out was still dog-eared. He had read it 3 times, and Callie had been right. That clause was far from legally standard, as someone had claimed. A strange feeling stirred, not anger, exactly shame. He who had overseen hundreds of deals had nearly let his entire company walk into a legal disaster hidden in plain sight. And the one thing he couldn't shake was that his wife, Veronica, had urged him to sign without hesitation. The desk phone rang. Veronica, you still haven't signed. Her voice was impatient. Mitchell's voice was low. No. You're letting that girl get in your head. Who even is she? A janitor's daughter. Veronica laughed. Mitchell looked out at the deep red sky above the city. Lights shimmered faintly on the glass. She saw something you didn't, something none of the lawyers saw. There was a long silence on the other end. I'm coming to your office, Veronica said, then hung up back at home as Callie hit send. Jared Whitlow replied almost instantly. Don't respond to this address. I'll send an encrypted USB and access instructions. Be careful. They don't want you finding anything else. She saved the message and locked her screen. In the other room, her mother was watching the evening news. Callie couldn't hear it. Her mind was buzzing with a single thought. If they could hide that, then there's definitely more they're hiding. And for the first time, Callie didn't just want to speak the truth. She wanted to see the whole picture, no matter what it cost. Asterisk. The silver USB lay quietly in Callie's palm. It had arrived the next morning, tucked inside a plain envelope, along with a short handwritten note from Jared Whitlow. Don't use your home network. Go to the library. Enter the password exactly. Don't save anything. No signature, no return address. Just a few rushed, crooked lines written in haste, or maybe fear. Callie stood outside the Stonehaven Central Library, clutching her bag. The wind was cold, but not nearly as chilling as the feeling on her back, like someone was watching. She didn't stop, didn't hesitate. She walked straight into the public computer section, chose the most hidden corner, and plugged in the USB-A. Plain screen appeared. Access code _ she typed in the code from the note. FTX6RAVEN42 ding. A single folder appeared. Crosswell _audit _files. Callie took a deep breath and opened it. Up on the 28th floor, Mitchell Grant sat by his office window, watching rain mist over the city. His coffee had gone cold. The lines on his face were no longer signs of age but doubt. He had reread the contract 4 times. Page 14, Section C, Line 3, just as Callie had said, contained a subtle switch. Not just vague language, but a structural shift in the phrasing that had slipped past the legal team. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. At that moment, a knock came at the door. Veronica Grant entered, soft curls framing her face, a tailored gray dress hugging her figure, her perfume trailing behind like a silent assertion of power. I heard you still haven't signed, and postponed the announcement. Mitchell opened his eyes. He didn't stand. I need time. Veronica smiled faintly and approached the desk. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. A janitor's daughter made you doubt your legal team and me. Mitchell didn't answer. He just looked at her for a long, long time. Why did you say I didn't need to review the contract? Did you even read it? Veronica's face twitched, then composed itself again. You think I'm working with Marcus behind your back? Mitchell said nothing, but his eyes said everything. Back at the library, Callie opened one PDF file after another. There were names she didn't recognize. Silvergate Transfer, Iron Ridge Entity, Blackwell Schedules. But then she opened the merger file for a Houston company from 4 years ago. It clicked. A small firm, Stratwell Finance, had signed a deal eerily similar to the one with Crosswell Partners. 3 months later, they went bankrupt after being caught in a web of cross-litigation involving fake investment accounts. Crosswell wasn't held responsible. No one ever figured out why, but now Callie saw it. Page 14, section C line 3. Identical to the clause in Grant Sterling's current draft. A repeating trap. She whispered. That night, Mitchell drove alone to the Halcyon Tower Hotel, where Crosswell was hosting a closed-door investor event. He hadn't planned to go, but something had pulled him there at the edge of the opulent bar. He saw Marcus, Blackwood whiskey in hand, smiling radiantly, and next to him, Veronica. She leaned close, her hand lightly resting on Marcus's wrist. Marcus whispered something, then pulled out a black USB. He didn't hand it over, just brushed his fingertip along her wrist. A signal not meant for investors. Mitchell froze, then turned and walked away. He didn't need to hear any more. That same evening, Callie returned home, turned on her laptop, and reopened Jared's files. She filtered through the spreadsheets, Crosswell's transactions over the past 5 years. 3 names stood out in the beneficiaries column: Marcus Blackwood, Veronica Grant, Iron Ridge Strategies. British Virgin Islands, a repeating pattern of transfers. Every time a company signed a merger, Crosswell received a consulting fee. And not long after, the company collapsed. She knew, Callie whispered. She didn't just turn a blind eye. She was in on it. She pulled out her phone and texted Jared. I need to meet. I have proof now. No reply. An hour later, she tried calling. It rang 3 times, then cut off. The next morning, Callie stood in front of the apartment address Jared had sent in his first email. The door was slightly ajar. She pushed it gently. No one inside. The apartment was empty. No signs of a struggle. No one around. It's just a single file folder resting on the wooden table, with her initials handwritten on the cover. C.M. Inside was a small USB and a torn scrap of paper. They know I helped you. Don't come back. Find someone you trust. Fast. Callie stood frozen in the silent apartment, gripping the USB tight. She wasn't afraid, but now she understood one thing with absolute clarity. This was no longer just about a contract. At that same moment, in his office, Mitchell sat still by the window. The Stonehaven night stretched out before him. On his desk lay an old file, the sender, Jared Whitlow. One page was circled in red ink. The risk has grown too great. If someone can plant a trap with just one signature, the whole system can fall. J.W. Mitchell closed his eyes. For the first time in 23 years of leadership, he felt the ground beneath him start to crack. That morning, Callie sat alone in the far corner of Stonehaven Central Library, Jared's USB plugged into the computer. She wore headphones not for music, but to block out the world. Inside her head, everything spun like a maze. On the screen was a massive data sheet, hundreds of transaction lines, company codes, merger histories, and money flows. Callie had never studied finance, but she understood logic. And within that cold logic, a pattern emerged. A company lured by enticing terms. A contract signed with Crosswell Partners. A liability flipping clause hidden in Section C, then ... bankruptcy. And afterward, Iron Ridge Strategies received steady transfers pulled from liquidated assets. Each deal left a financial bloodstain. But only one party always walked away clean. She flagged every case: Stratwell Finance, Corn Investments, Northstone. Equity then, she stopped at a zipped file named Blackwood_Veronica_codes.zip. Callie took a deep breath. Using the password from Jared's letter, she decrypted the file and what she saw chilled her. It was a log of internal system access at Grant Sterling Capital, traced to the admin account of Veronica Grant. Her tracks ran through every contract, every legal directory, and every final version of documents Mitchell had signed in the past. She didn't just dip her hands in, Callie whispered. She led the whole thing. At the same time, on the 28th floor, Mitchell Grant stood by the window. He hadn't touched his morning coffee. In his hand was a printed photo from the building's security cameras. Veronica stepping out of the elevator with Marcus Blackwood after a meeting she'd claimed she missed due to a tax attorney consult. The man in the photo, once Mitchell's trusted business partner, placed his hand on Veronica's lower back, as if they had nothing left to hide. The phone rang. It was Celeste Young, the civil rights attorney Mitchell had contacted for an independent review. She was in the lobby. Celeste entered the office with the composure of someone who had dismantled federal-level money laundering rings. Long black coat, neatly tied hair, and eyes sharp as blades. "I've reviewed the files you sent," she said. "Mitchell, what you're facing is an organized scheme potentially involving illegal transfers, tax evasion, and falsified internal documents." Mitchell leaned on the desk. "I want to stop the merger, but I need more than suspicion. I need evidence strong enough to take them to court." Celeste nodded. "I've handled cases like this before, but I'll admit I've never seen the first red flag spotted by a teenager." Mitchell was quiet. Then he said, "That girl Callie Moore, daughter of one of our night shift cleaners. She saw what our entire legal team missed." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "I want to meet her." That afternoon, Callie was walking through a residential block when a car pulled up. A man in a suit stepped out, not threatening, just too quiet. "Miss Callie Moore, who's asking?" He handed her a business card. "Mitchell Grant, Chairman, Grant Sterling Capital." Callie froze. "I'm not here to scold you," he said. "I'm here to ask for a conversation. You have something I need, and I have something you ought to hear." They sat across from each other in a small meeting room on the 27th floor, not like last time. This time, there were no cold stares, no guards at the door. Just the two of them, and Celeste Young. Quietly taking notes nearby, Mitchell laid the original contract on the table. "Would you mind showing me that clause again?" Callie flipped the pages. Her hands didn't tremble. "Page 14, Section C, Line 3, transfers all post-merger liability to your company. If there's litigation or financial loss, Crosswell walks. Your firm takes the hit." Celeste looked at Mitchell. She's not guessing. She knows what she's talking about. Mitchell exhaled, and for the first time in years, he spoke plainly. "I used to think I couldn't be fooled, but I let emotion blind me. Veronica was the person I trusted most." Callie said nothing. Celeste spoke up. "If we want to dismantle this network, we need more. Offshore accounts, shell structures, the hidden transactions draining contingency." Callie slowly reached into her backpack and pulled out the USB. "I got this from Jared. He helped me piece it together. He's gone now." Celeste took the device as if accepting a wartime map. "If this is what you say it is, you may have just handed us a legal bomb." That night, Veronica Grant entered the penthouse she shared with Mitchell, still radiating effortless grace. But something inside her was unsettled. The dinner table was empty. The office door shut. She checked her phone. A message from Marcus. "We have a problem. Mitchell's digging deeper, and the girl's back in the building." Veronica gripped the phone tightly. "Mitchell's not the problem," she replied. "The girl is." The fog in Stonehaven that night was thick as wool. Streetlights along the main avenue barely cast a glow strong enough to reveal the silhouette of a sleek, black SUV idling beneath the parking level of Halcyon Tower Hotel. Inside the car, Marcus Blackwood sat behind the wheel, holding a glass of untouched whiskey. His eyes were cold, glassy. Beside him, Veronica Grant had just ended a call with Mitchell. She leaned back in her seat, indifferent as if the potential collapse of an entire corporation had nothing to do with her. "You said you buried all the copies," she said, not looking at Marcus. "I did," he replied, "but the girl didn't dig with a shovel. She used her mind." And someone inside. Veronica clenched her jaw. "We have her name now. Callie Moore, Claymont High School. Daughter of Teresa Moore, janitor, on the 24th floor." Marcus smirked. "You know what needs to be done before she grows too big to silence." Veronica nodded. She reached into her purse and pulled out a black USB, the only remaining copy of her recorded conversations with Marcus, along with a few critical voice files. "If this blows up, this little thing will burn us both to the ground," she said. Marcus didn't reply, but his eyes lingered on the USB like it was a loaded gun. The next morning, at the old apartment complex on Derby Street, Callie woke to the sound of knocking. Her mother, Therese, had already gone to the store, leaving a note. "Be back soon. Don't do anything reckless." But it wasn't a neighbor at the door. It was a small parcel with no return address, only a scribbled note for CM. Inside was a printed photo of Veronica sitting across from Marcus at a rooftop cafe in the hotel, her hand visibly holding the black USB on a torn piece of paper. "No one is safe anymore. They know you're still digging. Trust no one. J." Callie gripped the photo, her heartbeat pounding. At Grant Sterling headquarters, Mitchell and attorney Celeste Young were reviewing the internal surveillance logs when an alert from the IT department popped up on the screen. Alert: unauthorized. Access to contingency account, security level, priority. Mitchell froze. They opened the log. The accessed account was Reserve Fund Number 4, set aside for bankruptcy protection and major lawsuits. Someone had tried to wire $2.5 million to an offshore account in Zurich. Luckily, the system flagged it in time. But the user who initiated the attempt was Veronica Grant. Celeste stared, stunned. "She's trying to run before the roof caves in." Mitchell's fists clenched. "She's not just complicit. She's stealing from under my roof." That afternoon, Callie sat alone in the library. On her laptop screen were rows of spreadsheets and encrypted emails Jared had left behind. Among them was a message thread between Marcus and a third party, an anonymous figure, using the ID case Stratus. Following the data trail, Callie uncovered 3 critical overlaps: a mysterious transaction between Crosswell and a Grant Sterling subsidiary. 3 months ago, an email from Veronica's account authorizing a post-merger assistance fund. And lastly, a voice recording. She clicked play. Veronica's voice was crystal clear. "If you make him suspicious, I'll handle it. Mitchell doesn't overthink, just push at the right moment." Then Marcus's voice. "And if he doesn't, go along. Then we remind him he has far too much to lose." Callie pulled off her headphones, her pulse racing. Everything she had suspected was now real. She forwarded the audio file to Celeste, along with a message. "If anything happens to me, use this." That night, Mitchell sat alone in his office. In front of him was the sealed merger contract, now wrapped in a legal evidence envelope. On his desk sat a thick folder of Veronica's unauthorized activity, and on the screen, the final email from Jared before he vanished. Iron Ridge wasn't the first. They've used the same structure for 3 straight mergers. If anyone can break this chain, it's the girl. Mitchell stood and looked out the window. The Stonehaven sky was velvet black. But he knew that somewhere in that darkness, a 16-year-old girl was stepping into a war no one had taught her how to fight. Across the city, in a soundproof meeting room at Halcyon Hotel, Veronica and Marcus sat side by side. On the screen, before them, played surveillance footage Callie entering the library, leaving later with a folder in hand. Marcus's voice had lost its usual smugness. "She's gone too far." Veronica's tone was ice. "If she wants to play like an adult, we'll show her what it means to bleed like one." That morning, Callie walked through the gates of Claymont High School like any other day. But the way people looked at her had changed. Some students avoided eye contact. Others stared as if seeing something both terrifying and unbelievable. She hadn't read the morning news, but just minutes after entering her classroom, a classmate shoved a phone in her direction. On the screen was a bold headline: "Anonymous source warns CEO of fraudulent merger, janitor's daughter." Behind the alert, a blurry photo from a security camera showed a girl with her hair in a bun, gray jacket, standing at the entrance of the 28th floor boardroom. Callie held her breath. She had known this would come, but not so fast, not so directly. At lunch, she found a folded note shoved into her locker. "We know where you live. Stay quiet. Stay safe." That evening, back at their third-floor apartment on Derby Street, Teresa was folding laundry when Callie came in, pale. She handed the note to her mother. Teresa read it, her hands trembling. "They're threatening you now," Callie whispered. "We need to go to the police," her mother said, but her eyes flickered with fear. "Or maybe we don't." "Callie, please. I don't need a scholarship. I don't need justice. I just need you alive." Callie gripped her mother's hands tightly. "Mom, I'm not stopping. I can't. If I back down, they win." Teresa didn't respond. She simply sat down, lowered her head, and covered her face with both hands. That night, Callie texted Celeste Young. "They've started threatening me. I need a lawyer. And if possible, protection." The next morning, Celeste appeared at the school gate, accompanied by a plainclothes federal agent. Security escorted them to the principal's office. Within 3 hours, a temporary witness protection order was signed. A motion for criminal investigation into Crosswell Partners was filed with the Stonehaven District Court. And for the first time, Callie Moore wasn't alone. At Grant Sterling Capital, Mitchell sat quietly in front of his monitor. On the screen was a strategic map he and Celeste had built with Callie linking shell corporations, offshore accounts, internal emails, and voice recordings. He turned to Callie, who was beside him, scribbling notes on the whiteboard. "You don't have to do all of this," he said. Callie didn't look up. "But if I don't, who will?" Mitchell went quiet. At just 16, the girl before him possessed a resolve most executives in that boardroom had never shown. A few days later, Celeste took Callie to a secure location, the Stonehaven Division office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Not for interrogation, but for a meeting. Agent Ava Raines, a veteran in financial fraud and white-collar crime, had received the full file from Celeste. She welcomed Callie into a softly lit meeting room, calm and pressure-free. "Can you confirm? All of this data was collected by you and someone named Jared Whitlow." Callie nodded. "Jared used to work at Grant Sterling. He was the first person to believe me. Then he disappeared." Ava's voice was serious. "We're trying to locate him. But right now, we need something more. Are you willing to become an official witness if this case goes to trial?" Callie looked her straight in the eye. "I didn't come here to walk away." That night, Mitchell received a parcel left at his doorstep. No sender. Inside was a black USB, the same kind Veronica once carried. He plugged it into his private laptop. A voice recording began. Veronica's voice, sharp and unflinching. "If Mitchell finds out, we remind him why he kept quiet before." And if he doesn't back off, we end him. Then Marcus's voice followed, colder still. Or, we end the kid. Mitchell froze. He pulled out the USB and picked up his landline. Celeste. We're moving to phase 2. This is enough for preliminary indictment. Meanwhile, in a quiet southern neighborhood of Stonehaven, Marcus Blackwood sat in a car, flipping a metal lighter between his fingers. Veronica sat in the back seat, silent. On her phone was a message. Mitchell isn't backing down. The girl is working with the feds. Veronica sighed, then whispered, "We can't let her take the stand." Marcus tilted his head, his eyes darkening. Then it's time to put out the fire before it spreads. Courtroom 11B, Stonehaven District Court. A gray morning, heavy with fog. A long line of reporters crowded the cold stone steps of the courthouse. Inside, the names of the city's most powerful were being called to testify. The initial hearing. In the case of Grant Sterling Capital versus Crosswell, partners with key figures. Marcus Blackwood and Veronica Grant, accused as masterminds, was no longer just a corporate affair. Callie sat in the third row between Celeste Young and her mother. Teresa Moore, her hands were ice cold. But when Mitchell Grant turned to meet her eyes and gave a slight nod, Callie saw something she hadn't before. Trust. Judge McAllister entered. Tapping the gavel lightly. Court is now in session. Celeste stepped forward first, her voice steady and precise as she opened her file. Your Honor, this case isn't just about financial fraud. It's about systemic manipulation over years across companies and countless lives. And the first person to notice it was not a lawyer, not an auditor, but a high school student, the only one who read that clause with eyes unclouded by profit. She turned to the gallery. I call our first witness, Callie Moore. All eyes followed as Callie walked to the stand. She wore a white shirt, her hair tied up neatly, and simple canvas shoes, old but clean. She placed her hand on the Bible, her voice small but unwavering. I, Callie Moore, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Celeste nodded gently, then asked, Callie, can you tell the court how you came to be involved in this case? Callie looked straight ahead. I cleaned the Grant Sterling building with my mom. That day, I was in charge of the photocopy room on the 27th floor. I found the merger contract left on the copier. I opened it, read it tanned on page 14, section C. I saw something wrong. What was wrong? That clause quietly and intentionally shifted all legal and financial liability from Crosswell to Grant Sterling after the merger. I'm not a lawyer, but I could tell it was a trap. The press gallery was silent. Across the aisle, Marcus Blackwood raised an eyebrow. Veronica sat motionless. Celeste continued, Why did you speak up? You could have stayed quiet like everyone else. Callie furrowed her brow slightly. Because if I stayed quiet, Mr. Grant would have signed. The company could have collapsed. Hundreds of jobs lost, all because of a clause no one noticed. Do you believe you're old enough to understand adult matters? Callie turned to face the panel directly. Just because I clean floors doesn't mean I don't see the dirt. Defense counsel stood up. Objection. That statement is emotionally charged. Judge McAllister overruled. The witness is stating her perception. Celeste stepped back, yielding the floor. Crosswell's lead attorney, a seasoned, sharp man, rose. He smiled slightly. Miss Moore, have you ever studied law? No. So you believe a high school student can read complex legal language better than the city's top lawyers? Callie answered calmly. I don't read like a lawyer. I read like someone with nothing to lose. And that made me see what others were too afraid to see. The courtroom paused in stillness. One of Grant Sterling's senior executives whispered, From behind Mitchell, she's not an ordinary kid. The hearing took a short recess. Callie stepped down. Mitchell met her with a quiet gaze and placed a hand on her shoulder. You just did something this industry hasn't done in generations. You spoke up. Callie looked at him. I'm not done yet. Now it was Mitchell Grant's turn on the stand. Mr. Grant, Celeste asked, what made you believe the word of a girl whose name you hadn't even known before? Mitchell paused for a moment. Because I used to be like her. I believed in transparency. Then I lost my way. Trusted numbers that looked good on paper. But when she pointed to the line I was about to sign, I realized I nearly lost everything I built. And what did you discover afterward? I discovered that my wife's the person I trusted most was manipulating me. And my business partner. Marcus wasn't a partner. He was digging the hole for me to fall into. Later, Veronica Grant was called to the stand. Her face was flawless, hair immaculate, voice polished. But then, Celeste played a recording. If Mitchell suspects something, I'll handle it. He's not brave enough. Just push him at the right time. The room went silent. Veronica closed her eyes. For the first time, her voice wavered. I never meant for it to go that far, but you helped it along. Celeste cut in. Can you confirm you signed the amended clause? Veronica didn't answer. But her hand clenched on the table as the court adjourned that day. Callie exited through the side entrance to avoid the press. Mitchell walked beside her. You don't have to come back if you don't want to, he said. No, Callie replied. I'll be back. I'll stay until all of it comes to light. Mitchell smiled, saying nothing. But in his eyes, Callie saw it clearly. This fight was no longer hers alone. The courthouse was barely open for the day, yet the front steps were already packed. A group of Claymont High students stood with signs that read, "We stand with Callie, and truth has no title." In just 1 week since the initial hearing, the story of Callie Moore had spread like wildfire. Newspapers, television, social media, everywhere. People were talking about the janitor's daughter who exposed a billion-dollar contract. But for Callie, it was all noise. She didn't care about being known. She just wanted the truth to be seen. Courtroom 11B was once again filled to capacity. Judge McAllister entered, face stern, voice firm, after reviewing all evidence, testimonies, voice recordings, and financial trace reports. This court delivers a preliminary verdict in the case involving Crosswell Partners and associated individuals. He glanced toward the defendants, Marcus Blackwood. The court finds you guilty of conspiring to commit financial manipulation, creating shell corporations, and concealing legal liabilities for profit through merger schemes. Marcus did not flinch. He stared straight at the judge, his arrogance seemingly unbreakable. Veronica Grant. The court finds you guilty of forging internal documents, aiding financial fraud, and attempting to interfere with Grant Sterling Capital's reserve systems for personal gain. Veronica closed her eyes. For the first time, her face bore no flawless makeup, just the raw truth of someone defeated. The court hereby sentences each defendant to 10 years in federal prison, with no parole. Eligibility for the first 7 years. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Mitchell Grant sat in the front row, his hands clenched, then released. He didn't feel joy, only relief. Not because the traitors had been punished, but because something far worse had not happened. His company didn't fall. Hundreds of employees didn't lose their jobs because one girl looked closely at a piece of paper, Celeste. Young gave Callie's shoulder a light squeeze as they exited the courtroom. Reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs went off nonstop. One journalist called out, "Callie, how does it feel to be a hero?" Callie paused briefly, then answered softly, "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who didn't close her eyes." The next day, at the 5th floor auditorium of Grant Sterling Capital, Mitchell Grant stood at the podium for the first time addressing all employees since the crisis. "I stand here not as a CEO, but as a man who was once blind. I believed in signatures, in polished promises, in people I thought were family, and I almost let this company fall." He paused, eyes shifting to the front row where Callie Moore sat in a simple blazer. Gaze steady and calm. "But someone saved us. Not out of duty, not out of obligation, but because she saw something wrong and dared to say it." The room fell into reverent silence. Today, I'm proud to announce the establishment of the Callie Moore Scholarship Fund to support young people with vision, courage, and the conviction to walk into a room full of power and say, "This is wrong." Thunderous applause erupted. Callie bowed her head. She didn't cry, but her mother, Teresa Moore, standing quietly in the back, wiped away a single tear. That evening, in his newly refurbished office, Mitchell sat alone. On the shelf behind him, among financial awards and honorary plaques, stood a modest frame, a photo of Callie at the whiteboard, pointing at the hand-drawn diagram she'd created. Beneath the photo, small engraved plaque read, "Truth isn't loud, but it lasts." A soft drizzle fell over Stonehaven that morning, not a downpour. Just quiet drops tapping against the glass roof of the central train station, where Callie Moore sat with a small backpack and a northbound train ticket. In her hand was an acceptance letter from Wellington University, full scholarship for public policy and community law. At the bottom of the letter, one bold sentence read, "We believe you will be a maker of change." She had folded it 3 times and hadn't opened it again since it had been a week since the court convicted Marcus Blackwood and Veronica Grant. Callie hadn't returned to school, nor had she returned to Grant Sterling Capital despite Mitchell Grant offering her an honorary advisor role 3 separate times. The media called her the youngest whistleblower in U.S. financial history. News stations wanted interviews. A film studio even proposed a documentary, but Callie didn't reply. Not out of pride, but because she was tired. The night before, her mother Teresa Moore sat beside her on their narrow kitchen bench, folding dish towels, eyes glancing toward the evening radio news. "So you're really leaving?" Callie was silent for a moment. "I think I need to get away or to go somewhere new." Callie looked up at her. Both. At Grant Sterling Capital, Mitchell Grant paced in his office. He was no longer the traditional CEO, now in a plain shirt and reading glasses. On the wall behind him, a reform blueprint, trimming the middle layers, increasing internal transparency, and launching a new training initiative. Celeste Young stepped in, holding a folder. Still no word from Callie about the advisor role. "I know," Mitchell sighed. "You think she should go?" Mitchell looked out the rain-speckled window. "I think she should. For herself, not for us." But Callie hadn't left the city. She rose from the train station bench and stepped outside. The cold rain soaked through her sleeves, but her head was burning. She wandered down old streets, the ones where she and her mother had waited for buses home, the ones where she'd hand-delivered scholarship forms to every small school in town. She stopped in front of Stonehaven Central Library, where it had all started, where she had searched through the Crosswell files, where her hands had trembled opening Jared Whitlow's USB. She walked inside, the familiar scent of old paper, worn carpet, and cold air conditioning pressed against her chest. At a corner table, she reopened the Wellington letter. This time, she read it all. The final line echoed in her mind. "Not everyone sees the problem, but those brave enough to act, they make history." Callie closed her eyes. That afternoon, she knocked on Celeste Young's office door, inside the Whitestone City Executive Center. Celeste answered, surprised. "Callie, can I study and help at the same time?" Celeste raised an eyebrow. I thought you were leaving. I still am. But I want to do something here first, before I go. Celeste laughed softly, a girl asking for a double workload. I like that. That evening, in their small apartment, Teresa Moore washed the dishes while Callie typed an email. To Mitchell Grant, subject. Final answer? Yes. The message was short. I'll help build the company's transparency training program, but only until the end of summer. After that, I'm leaving for school. Because no one should clean up something they don't get to stay and live in. Mitchell. Read the message while sifting through stacks of reform reports. He nodded, didn't smile, just quietly stood, removed his silver watch, and placed it in the drawer. That night, on the 16th floor of Grant Sterling, the conference room lights were on for the first time in months. On the whiteboard, internal transparency, flowchart scribbles, rough diagrams, uneven lines at the center. Written in the darkest marker, anyone has the right to ask why. Callie Moore stood before the board, taking it in. She didn't stay. For the spotlight, not for the title, but for those who would walk into this room. After her hand, not be silenced just because of the uniform their mother wore. One crisp autumn morning, Grant Sterling Capital hosted its first open staff forum, a gathering where every employee, from security guards to department heads, was invited to sit in the same circle. No long boardroom tables, no titles on name tags. Just people, sitting side by side, around a single board in the center of the room, bearing the words, "What have you never dared to ask?" Callie Moore stood beside that board, not in a blazer, not wearing a badge, just a simple blue shirt and a marker in her hand. At her feet was a pile of sticky notes, each carrying a question anonymously submitted by employees over the past month. Why are the penalties in HR contracts so clear, but the benefits so vague? Why don't maintenance workers get performance reviews like other departments? I once saw a small violation, but was too scared to report it. Who protects someone like me? Callie read each note. Each one felt like a voice long buried, finally heard. At the back of the room, Mitchell Grant stood silently, arms crossed. Beside him was Celeste Young, the woman who had helped turn Callie's words into policy. She's doing what an entire line detested. She's doing what an entire board never dared, Celeste whispered. She's not breaking the system, Mitchell replied. She's teaching it how to breathe again. That afternoon, Callie rode the elevator with her mother, Teresa Moore, who had just finished her midday window cleaning shift. What did you think of the forum, Mom? Teresa smiled faintly, still wearing her rubber gloves. Never thought I'd sit in a meeting with the CEO and not be asking for a day off. They looked at each other. Then both laughed. That evening, Callie stood on the train platform, this time not to run, but to begin, truly. Her old backpack slung over her shoulder. In her pocket, a thick notebook where she had written down every discussion, every concern, raised every suggestion from janitors, cooks, and delivery drivers. She called it the real report, not data, but humanity. Wellington University waited in the distance, but she knew her true imprint was behind her. On the top floor of Grant Sterling, Mitchell Grant stood at the window, watching the streetlights flicker. News had just arrived. Crosswell Partners officially dissolved. Assets seized. Investors filing lawsuits. Veronica Grant's appeal denied. Marcus Blackwood indicted for federal bribery. The building now stayed lit later, not for crisis meetings, but for the reform team's evening sessions. Mitchell nodded quietly, eyes resting on the board near the glass wall. We're not afraid of questions, we're afraid no one dares to ask them. Weeks later, at Wellington University's welcome ceremony, the dean read aloud from an essay submitted by a new student in the Law and Justice program. I don't want to change the world. I just want the world to stop overlooking the ones who clean it every night. And if anyone says a 17-year-old girl can't understand financial contracts, let them read the clause I once stopped someone from signing. 1 year later, at Grant Sterling headquarters, a new sign was mounted on the wall. Integrity Center, Callie Moore, inside. Hundreds of new hires were being trained under a model written by Callie herself. Every session began with one question: what do you see that's wrong, and do you dare to say it? In the final scene, Callie returned to Stonehaven one winter day. She stepped into the old library and sat at the same corner she once had. She opened her chipped laptop and began typing a new essay. Justice doesn't live in courtrooms or TV headlines. It begins in hallways, elevators, copy rooms, and in the eyes of a janitor when her daughter asks, "Mom, will anyone listen? If I say something's wrong?" She paused and typed the final line. Now, someone will. There are stories that leave us sitting still after they end. Not because they're loud, but because they're so quiet, like the footsteps of janitors in the late hours, like the eyes of a 17-year-old girl pointing to a signature and saying, "This is wrong." Together, we followed Callie's journey, a young girl brave enough to speak the truth in a room full of power. And the most beautiful part, she didn't just save a company. She reminded the world that truth doesn't care about your age, your background, or how clean your shoes are. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever thought your voice wasn't loud enough to matter, then this story was for you. Thank you for staying until the very end. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. Snail Story will continue to share these quiet tales, slow, honest, and warm enough to hold in your chest long after. See you in the next story. And remember, truth doesn't have to shout, but it always stays the longest.